Okay. Live with another episode of Run With It. We have Dmitry Dragilev here. I probably butchered your name. I'm sorry about that,
That's
but
fine. You're
maybe
good.
Ethan could do a better job. We are, going to get started with the interview. You guys ready to go?
Yep.
Ready.
All right. Welcome to Run With It, where we bring you business ideas from proven founders. Each episode, you'll hear a new business idea and the exact steps our guest would take to get started. We are your hosts, Chris, Justin,
And Ethan Janney. And on today's show, we have Dmitry Dragilev. He's the founder of Just Reach Out, a platform which has helped 5,000 plus brands and small businesses pitch journalists and get featured in press all on their own without the help of PR firms.
And that is super impressive, but that is not what we're going to be talking about here, at least not primarily. Dmitry, our show is all about new business ideas. You've got one to improve the recycling process, actual recycling, keeping recyclables out of landfills. Welcome to the show and tell us about the idea you would like our listeners to run with.
Yeah. So I want to build a company that actually does real recycling of products we all kind of recycle. So if you're listening to this, you are probably have recycled something in your life, hopefully. At least one thing. You might have taken a plastic bottle, thrown it into a recycling bin. Since China stopped taking our recycling, we have not been actually recycling in this country. We've been throwing it into landfills. So when we go through the trouble of putting it in all these different bins and get it all collected and we feel good about it, 80% of that actually goes right in the landfill. And so I want to build a company that takes some of these, things that can be recycled, plastic, maybe paper, and creates materials for other companies to use. So there's companies out there like Allbirds and stuff like that, where they use recycled materials to build their products, but we are not recycling as a nation. So,
Tell us
and
about that. What was the company you just mentioned? I don't know if I'm familiar with it.
oh, it's called Allbird. Allbirds, it's like sneakers, shoe company, makes shoes from sheep wool, and they
Okay.
make laces from recycled bottles, I think. And its packaging is 90% recycled cardboard. I mean, there's some of these companies out there that take, they'll make, like, there's a company called Method. They make dish and hand soap packaged in bottles, and these bottles are made out of plastic that's made from like ocean stuff that they find in ocean, the plastic in ocean. And so there are some companies out there, if you start doing research, that take waste and they turn it into a plastic bottle, or they take waste and they create shoelaces out of it. There is a company called Pella, which creates cases for iPhones and smartphones out of recycled plastic.
So this is one of the bigger ideas that we've had on the show in terms of scope and ambition. For sure, it's not only changing a lot of the infrastructure within the United States, but it's changing the habits of pretty much everyone in order for it to be effective, and doing so in a very low margin environment. It sounds like a recipe for a very difficult business to start. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I heard an episode in 2019 on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, where she interviewed Kate O'Neill, who is an environmental scientist and who wrote a book about waste. I think her book is called Waste. And she openly talked about the problem that now 4 years, I think 4 years ago, when China said we no longer are going to take your recycling. Up until that point, we were reliant on Asia processing our stuff. So they would process it and they'll create more stuff that we'd buy from them. And it would just go around, around, around. When that was broken, we tried to put trash like Malaysia, Vietnam, some of these other countries, but we just couldn't. The countries said, we're not going to take your stuff anymore. And so we just didn't have a way to do this. And really, I feel like to make money with it, the West is about sort of possessions and money and things we accumulate. Our life is like how much do we own our possessions? We define our lives that way. The East is about, I don't know, like family and society, and that comes at the forefront for them. And so, and that's very generic, but it's just the way we work here. And so our society, our economy, it needs to make money with this. And I guess we just haven't figured out. It seems like private companies, some of them, like I was talking about, are using recycled materials to, for packaging or for shoelaces or, like different types of things that go with the product. But we, on a major scale, just don't know how to make money with it. And there haven't, like, I've read articles in Fast Company and where there are these small shops that, they'll go and they'll collect trash like plastic on the ocean. They'll make sunglasses out of it or something. But these are kind of like, or surfboards out of plastic in the ocean. Like I've seen a couple.
So these
stories.
are just like one-off things, though, is kind of your comment. Like it's just a here and there thing, maybe it's Tom's shoes or something or whatever, and they're pulling it off. But so, okay, if a small player can do it and it's working, then what's going on the larger scale. I could be a huge wet blanket here on the whole thing. Having pursued eco-friendly business type projects. Many years ago, I attempted to start a company that was around compost collection in the city of New York. And so, well, I'll tell you one thing. I have so much respect for anyone who maintains momentum in these environmentally friendly business pursuits, be it Elon Musk or, your local person who's involved in, government compost collection projects. So what I found is they could be really exciting, and I'm generalizing here, it could be really exciting to start ideas like this because you have this feeling like I'm going to save the planet. And then it can be conversely that much more disappointing and just like it just crushing when you go, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem. Nobody else is on board. I've got a lot of red tape to fight through. There's a lot of things to restructure. So aside from bringing it down into the conversation, I guess I just wanted to throw like a dose of my experience into it. And we can talk about that. Like, how do you keep momentum when you're working on a project that might have some more difficulties than you thought? And maybe you could even bring in to us, I'm sure you've had obstacles even with your PR business, in terms of what do you do when you hit this, like these moments where you're like, this is a big obstacle. Have you had moments like that?
Definitely. It's so first thing, funny you mentioned compost, because in New York City, the city collects it now, and that was the best compost collection I've ever had living anywhere because in the States, because I didn't have to pay for it, and you could literally take meat and all these other things in it. And I actually went to an area where they used it and they composted it. It smelled really bad, but it was just it was just incredible what they've done, and nowhere else have I seen that Here, there's a paid service. We live in New Hampshire, where they come to your house and collect compost, and that's been pretty popular. With like, it's been around for a while, and there's restaurants that use it and stuff. But yeah, it's in terms of just when you would just reach out, or yeah, I think just reach out was the main business where I kind of been bootstrapping it on my own. It's very hard to stay excited about something that a lot of people don't value right away or don't see a vision in it. And I feel like the narrative that I kept telling myself is that, hey, if you knew you were not going to make any money with this idea ever in your life, and you knew this was going to eventually, grind to a ground and not completely fail, but maybe, not become a big business for you at all, would you still do it? And so in my world, I'd still help people pitch journalists any way I can. I feel like I love the aspect of creating a pitch and sending it to a journalist. And whether I build a big business out of it or not, I would have a good time doing it. And so from a business standpoint, it definitely doesn't make sense to sink time into something that's not going to get a big acquisition at the end or get a bunch of people using it. And you would have felt like a failure if it failed. But from personal standpoint of having a good time and spending time worthwhile where you have helped people and you made some change in their lives, I think is awesome. It's kind of like,
I'm gonna follow up on that question because I think there's something that's glaring for me right now. And I'm noticing it especially in the, just I made a comment before we started. You are so incredibly chill. So I noticed that. Also noticed that, you're very successful in what you've built. And I'm also noticing you're working in PR, which I think, whoa, that would take one of those kind of like, hey, everybody, this is what I got to talk about. A 1 and a 2 and a 3. And, like a lot of people think about marketing and sort of reaching out and promoting as things that you got to kind of go over the top. And I noticed I'm very struck by the fact that you're almost alternatively chill. And I'm wondering do you have an opinion, or maybe we can reflect on an opinion, how that fits into staying the course on, a project or something that you're interested in promoting. You're not coming across as this like grit, intense guy, but somehow you do have the grit. Do you have any comments on that? Self-reflective? I don't know if you're even aware of it.
I'm just very quiet, I guess, in terms of just being vocal, because I came to this country when I was like 11. I didn't know the language or the culture, and everything was foreign to me until college, like in my 19, 20. So for like 7 years, I was this like quiet, lonely kind of like loner that like didn't have friends, was just like thought everything was weird in this country or this culture. I was like, just like, I missed all the movies, the cultural like things. Like I think my first Halloween, my only Halloween, was at the age of 13 when my grandmother made me a costume of a witch, which I didn't want to wear. And I was like, that is ridiculous. Why are they passing out candy? Like that was my life for a while. So it was very quiet, like trying to absorb how to act, what to do, how to say things to people. And then I was a computer science major, so that didn't really make me much of a communicator or anything. And then when I left that career and I went to California, I had to learn, like I wanted to learn business. So I got an MBA and started working for startups. And I kind of have to like force myself to really become a little bit more communicative and extroverted. And I think I've become more of an extrovert now, but I don't know, just the way I operate is just time box myself into task lists I have this to-do list and I just go and attack it. I'm like a taskmaster kind of person.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it sounds like maybe just from the very fact that you've had to study that kind of communication because it didn't feel natural, especially in this country, that because you made a study of it, you're become more of an expert in it. I can appreciate that. Well, thank you for taking that little sideline. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's get back to the
Go for it.
idea at hand
Yeah.
here. So that's a nice tangent, but that sets us up for why you chose to share this idea with the audience. It is a very big idea, and that quiet confidence that we've alluded to. We didn't call it that necessarily, but that is interesting. That juxtaposition that Ethan is talking about with someone who is a little bit quieter, starting a PR firm, and being able to face some of the obstacles that I'm sure came about with starting a new business from that perspective. With this idea, it's there are a lot of questions that we need to answer, and I think at this position, it's a good chance to throw some stuff against the wall and see what sticks. We don't necessarily need to stay tied to the original framing of the idea. So I'm going to throw out some thoughts to alternative approaches to try and achieve the same goal that you're describing, which is increasing sustainability and reuse and recyclability, reducing the amount of waste that goes into landfills. One thing that has always irked me is the transportation costs of recycling in itself. The fact that if you were doing a centralized system, you need to collect materials at everyone's home and then bring it to a recycling processing facility. I know garbage trucks, their mileage is 2 miles per hour, 2 miles per gallon, rather, their efficiency. So it's a very inefficient process to transport all this material. I wonder if there's something that we can do that would make it easier for people to recycle at home. And it's not going to be every stream of recycling. Maybe you can only do compostable materials, or maybe you can only do certain types of plastics or glass. But something that I wonder if a decentralized approach would be more accessible in that it wouldn't come with the transportation costs.
I'd almost want to connect with an expert in the process of sort of what does the process look like for plastics versus paper, and how long does it take? How expensive is it? Because what seems to be the issue is that it's very expensive and there's no economic sense to make that investment. So it's just a feel-good type of thing. So you see all these reports that come out and say, well, this much tons have been compressed into recycling by us being better at knowing what to recycle and what to throw away and collecting recycling, whatever it is. But we're not, like, as people in the Western world, we have to be able to make money with it. And whether it's altruism or whatever, like it's always on the second, third, fourth priority. And to me, we just haven't figured out how to properly make money with recycling because we've always been shipping it overseas. And that has been, we've gotten credits and we've gotten discounts by giving them our recycling and importing stuff from overseas. So now I was almost thinking like transportation is a big issue of it, right? And then also like what happens after we put it, like, compress it, we have a pallet of plastic. Kind of how can we take that pallet of plastic and at scale sell it to someone who is going to make more money out of it, because maybe it needs to be processed somehow
Well,
differently.
I'll jump in here. I have a little bit of background in this and connections. Um, Before I get to that, someone also needs to sort it. So part of the reason we were sending material all to China is because you could pay someone $2 a day to sort your recyclables and toss the stuff that's the grease laden pizza boxes that can cause the entire stream to be adulterated and need to go to the trash. Someone can be paid feasibly, at least in that economy, to do that work, and you can't do that here. Even the transportation cost to send it to China, plus the cost of labor there, it made financial sense to people working there to do it. Um, Now with I'm speculating a little bit here, but with China's economy improving and the overall income rising for people there, it probably doesn't make as much sense. Uh,
Hmm.
Two, in terms of the processing for, let's say, that pallet of plastic, I know that Shell, my former company, they are taking plastic streams like that and gasifying it and processing it in plastic plants, uh, recycling it as feedstock for base plastics that they're making. Um, so that's one opportunity. It's hard to scale any single one of these solutions, right? And that's why I come back to this idea that we need to stack stack a bunch of decentralized solutions in order to do this well. And it's not as sexy to come up with something like that. It's a lot easier to think of. We can take this entire stream and send it to one place and we'll just profitably process everything. But I
Well,
think
I
that's
think
extremely unlikely.
lining up, I feel like when I was building Just Reach Out very early on, like it was the idea of, hey, let's find somebody who's going to pay for this. Let's build something for them and let's see how they're going to use it. And let's find another person who's going to use this PR machine. Let's find another one. Let's all see how they're going to use it. And based on that, decide what the product would be and improve it based on that feedback initially. And so you take the feedback from the customer to continue building the tool. And I never wrote line of code. I have an article that says I actually got 10 customers before I started writing line of code, because I used to just put stuff on the paper, show it to them, get them to buy into the idea by getting feedback from them, redraw my little diagram, show them how the product is going to work, and keep doing that over and over and over again. So by the time I was launching my MVP, I had customers that are going to use this thing because they were invested in it because of the feedback. So with the recycling, maybe it makes sense, like taking Shell as an example and lining up one case where you go to your local dump, you say, I want to buy your recycling, like this much tons of this plastic that you get, I'll pay this much, and trying to line up a deal with Shell to resell it, just to see if you can line up 3 of these opportunities or something, just to see if there is money to be made for collecting, recycling, and reselling it to people who are already in need of it or need to use it, and what kind of processing needs to happen for them to buy it, if there is any, just to see if the economics make sense. And at this point, not physically doing it, but just researching it enough to figure out, like, if we know somebody who's buying or needs plastic like this, and figuring out what format they need it, essentially, like, if they're going to pay money for third-party plastic that's been used, okay, like, how does it need to be packaged? How much are they going to pay? And then what do you have to pay someone else to process it? And can you make any kind of profit on it?
Yeah, that's a good action step of just, finding out who will pay for plastic, whether it's, before it's in basically before it's been recycled, right? Like recyclable plastic materials,
Or
kind of what you're referring to.
maybe, yeah, or maybe just compressed, somewhat recycled or something. Like
Right.
that's why I was like, what form? Like
Right.
I know there's all these companies that say that they use recycled materials, like
Right.
that Method bottles
Where
or
do they get it?
something,
Yeah.
or Allbirds sneakers,
Mhm.
or like there's these products that are saying like um, cases for smartphones that they were funded by Jay-Z. They're a customer of ours, but they only use recycled materials, and it's like rubbery cases, right? So you go to them and you're like, okay, so since you only use recycled materials, you must buy them from somewhere. Where do you buy them from?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's good.
Uh,
Like there's going to be places that make a list of companies that market themselves as using recycled materials, and then go find out what the supply chain process is. At some point, they're going to have to pay for materials, just like anybody else has to pay for raw materials, whether they're recycled or not. And at that point, what is the price point, and how are they making that decision to choose recycled versus non-recycled, and then how much does it cost? I'll also be interested to compare the recycled to non-recycled price. Who knows, times maybe it's actually less expensive, or if it isn't, what's the price differential, and how can you
right.
sell people recycled instead of, like, I could see how you could create a business selling people on using recycled materials if you understand if there's a profit incentive for using recycled materials over non-recycled. Oh, you could put this on your label, and then you could mark up the price by XYZ, so it doesn't matter, go for it.
Right, right. Yeah. Maybe there's other ways. Maybe you get credits from the government or something like that for, I don't know how that works, but I know that there are a bunch of brands that do that. I mean, you go to any supermarket, you look at that bag that's paper and it says that it's made from recycled materials. Cardboard boxes made from recycled materials. So I wonder, I mean, these are big companies that already have suppliers, but I basically wonder, like, if you can somehow the suppliers that these companies have, and they might be going to the dumps at your local town, but maybe they're not. So I wonder, like, maybe there's just not enough demand for all the other recycling that happens.
Well, I can answer that. Most of what goes to landfill is dirty dirty recycling. It's stuff that's contaminated with food, things that are too
Okay.
costly to separate and clean and process. It all
Okay.
comes back to the economics. And I think that would be a good action step for the listeners to investigate the economics of current recycling streams. All of this is available on the EPA website, collection cost, how much the streams are valued at. And you can do what, back as a process engineer, we call the process flow diagram, where you have the stream coming in. How much does it cost to acquire that stream? How much does it cost to separate it, process it, and how much are each of those outputs worth? And you can calculate from there whether the economics will make sense. To me, that's a first step. And if they don't make sense with the current systems in place, then at least you can start honing in on some of the individual processes that are involved, whether that's the collection, the sorting. Maybe there is some sort of behavior that you can change with people to change from single stream recycling to multi-stream recycling.
Well, I
That's a big
know
thing. That's
education is mainly the recycling that we all throw away, like you said, is dirty. So nobody wants to process it. So everything goes in the trash, or is just not the right form of plastic and that's needed to really, make a difference and be recyclable. Like there's plastic number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and a lot of them just can't. Like we throw stuff in the recycling thinking it'll get recycled, but that container from your hummus or your yogurt is just not that this short-lived plastic, so it's just not going to work. So I guess we need to find stuff that we all throw away that can be easily cleaned and used. Maybe it's metal, maybe it's some kind of metal, or maybe it's paper. I'd have to maybe look more into it, or somebody that knows more. But I do know that, yeah, a lot of it is like dirty or just not the right kind of material for people to like reuse in other products.
Yeah, it's looking like that's about 15 to 20% of recyclables end up in the landfill because they are dirty or not truly recyclables.
Well, in this interview, she was mentioning how because we don't have real processing plants, it just kind of like sits around, and then sometimes it would get sold to companies, but a lot of times there's just no systems in place to process it and sell it to companies. And so I guess like there was a plant that was processing it, but then they had to sell it to somebody who was overseas, and the shipping was too expensive or something like that, she was saying. So I don't know, like I wonder, like, do we need more plants to do it, or do like more infrastructure? I don't even know.
You know what I'm keep thinking about? A couple of things. One is the whole idea of first, second, third, fourth order consequences, right? What's going on, I think, when we say that something's not profitable, especially in the United States economy, is most of our profitability is around first order consequences. Like, I'm going to buy this, it's going to make me happy right now. Perfect. Oh, it's going to kill my children someday. Fine. It's just first order consequences. This is kind of how our economy runs. So I think a lot of, at least in the West, in the East, Western economy, what we tend to do as entrepreneurs is try to bring these third order consequences. If we're trying to do good, we try to bring these third order consequences into the first order, whether it's, marketing toothpaste to people based on it feeling fresh in their mouth so that they actually brush their teeth and their teeth don't fall out. You take something that's a third order consequence and make it into a first order thing where it's more about your vanity and a fresh feeling in your mouth. And just the one thing I wanted to bring up here, which is interesting to note, that is kind of like a win-win. In Peter Diamandis's book on abundance, he mentions this idea it's similar to me. Serving the African cell phone market, right? It's not appealing because people don't have the budget, right? Like, people don't have the budget to pay a lot for a cell phone. But he makes this interesting point, but there is the scale. And so even though the individuals don't have a large budget, if you can serve a high volume of individuals, you're actually looking at maybe even a bigger market and more profitability than you originally would have thought. So I don't know if this is the case with recycling, but it's sounded to me like a similar kind of setup. It's a big third order consequence where you want to serve it. There's a first order resistance, but maybe there's a way of thinking on a bigger scale. I mean, maybe in order to handle recycling, it is a thing where you have to do it on a really, really large scale. And if you think about doing it that way, maybe then it becomes more profitable. Just trying to throw in ways to think about how to make it profitable.
Yeah, that sounds like something worth thinking about in terms of like, because in my mind, when I was thinking about it, I wasn't thinking like each household will contribute X pounds or kilograms of recycling. And I feel like each household might have a few items a week that are interesting enough to use in a big pallet that you sell to Shell or something like that. And so if you can at scale let those households know about it and give them some kind of credit for it, then it would start to kind of work. like there's a browser called Brave that I use. I don't use Chrome or Safari or anything. And it's the guy from Mozilla started it. He was sick and tired of like Google tracking you everywhere and all these scripts and ads and stuff. And so it just blocks everything. And so any kind of ads that people run through it, they have to go through the Brave browser only. And 70% of the revenues, anyways, a percentage of that revenues goes to you as a person using the browser. And so you get this like ding every day, like, oh, you've made $1.20, whatever, $1.50 or something. Tomorrow you make 75 cents. But it like has this like feel good effect. You're like, oh, like I'm browsing faster, I'm not seeing ads, and I'm making a little money. And you know that people who are running ads, they literally the browser doesn't keep anything for themselves. It just they run and they share the profits with the people browsing it. So I was like, something like that for
Yeah.
this recycling.
I think
I
I've
don't
got
know.
an interesting angle here, right? So I like what you said, like each household it has a few things, or maybe it's certain households that contribute. Maybe it's the opposite of what you're saying with Brave browser. So Brave browser is a situation where your privacy is, like a huge factor. But what if you enlisted those people that were like the vigilant recyclers, and you had actual recycling bins that would be placed around cities, like actual recycling. And in order to throw something into it, you actually had to scan your tag, and you had to on your honor be like, I'm contributing to this, meaning I vow that it's going to be clean. I'm going to choose the right materials. Nobody's going to have to sort it, whatever. Because there are people that take it that seriously, right?
Yeah.
And then by being a part of the system and tracking you individually, maybe you get points or credits, or maybe you even earn some income or something like that. But in those cases, you can take advantage of the people that are really passionate about it and are going to do it right, not being mixed in with the people who just don't have it right yet. And maybe it grows from there. Once people see how cool it is to be an actual recycler, then you get other people jumping in on the idea.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, totally. Because I feel like there's people that would do that. Convincing them shouldn't be that hard because they're already an avid recycler. From the PR standpoint, I mean, I could see doing stories, and we've run stories in recycling, but it's just doing stories or like, hey, do you actually want to make a difference? Here is a way to do
Just
it.
gonna pause you for 1 second. We're getting a little mic noise from you all of a sudden. I don't know why. Maybe it's rubbing on your shirt. So just
okay, yeah.
Change the position of the mic real quick.
On. All right. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, cool.
It wasn't happening until now, so I don't know what happened. But if you,
I think I was like maybe moving this way or something.
Yeah.
I have the zipper here, so I'm.
Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, continue. I just want to make sure people can hear it.
From a PR standpoint, I see it as a story. Like, hey, locally, do you want to make a difference? There's these new bins. Make an actual difference. And so it just comes back from like the cost perspective, like distributing the bins, collecting them, then compressing everything and then selling it. Can you make a buck on it? Make sure that like people can get paid, and then you can make a profit by selling it. Because
I could see a bootstrapped way of doing it in a local community, like now that we're saying like this type of idea, it could be a small neighborhood in Brooklyn. It could be my local suburb, and just talk with the local government, maybe try to sign some community members on board, distribute some of these bins throughout the community. And maybe, you get a little, what do you call it? A fob, and only if you have the fob, those are pretty inexpensive. It opens the bin, you throw something in, and it tracks, who put it in. Maybe it even measures the weight that you put in, gives you a little, I bet you could even find some do-good funding, right? Like just some people who are like, this is a pretty interesting idea. Like I'll put 50K for you to put a few, get a few of these bids together, put them in, provide you some credits just to see, would this have legs? and you might even be able to get it to the point where you're actually selling it to the way that a typical recycling collector would be selling it to the next level of the system or getting some government credit for it. But I think one benefit you have with this type of idea is the PR side of it. So you could start out without profitability, getting some funding from people who really care to try to make a difference. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. This feels to me like my friend, I'm wearing his t-shirt now, BioMeme. This is a company that lets you put your spit or your DNA from your nose or blood or anything into this little mini device that's kind of like a PCR machine. And on your iPhone, you can see how much of a virus you have in your body, on any virus. And so right up until COVID, they were doing all sorts of random things. And I remember the very first time that they got funding was from this Reddit guy. And the Reddit guy was like, that sounds like a great idea. And they had like absolutely almost nothing. They had like a prototype of the device that was kind of working with an iPhone, but it was just, and then, like now, they're, Mark Cuban has invested. There's like, I feel like 100 people, 50 people, I don't know how many people, but now FDA greenlit them into doing COVID testing, and they've never dreamed of this, but but they sold more product than they ever had in their lives. And so, but they all started from this like idea of, hey, this was even a much more complex idea. And we had like compost thing that was organized by a community. I remember in North End when I lived in Boston, also kind of like a citizen led type of thing, like a Good Samaritan type of thing, which turned into a mini composting company that is similar to what happened here in Portsmouth when the Fox composting started. They started going door to door saying, hey, we have these bins, we're going to let people put that stuff in there. And then they're like, well, actually to collect them, it's going to be $20 a month. And then it's going to be $40 a month. And now they're in, it's free at the dump, but if you want to do it at home, you got to collect it and put out your bin, and they charge you a fee. And now restaurants do it, and I think they got some funding as well initially. So I feel like, yeah, get it going from the PR standpoint, putting it into like local newspapers would work. People would say yes to it. And it just breaks down to like how much Shell is going to pay us. So Chris is just going to have to go and talk to his friends over there.
I think that's a good action step to leave the listener. Go out there and figure out what the stream is worth. I think it's time for the rapid fire questions here. Dmitry, you ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Explain this idea to your mom.
So you throw away all this recycling and it goes to landfill. Can you make a way to build it? Can you figure out how to sell it to make money?
Is this a 6, 7, or 8-figure business?
Oh, 7.
Who is your first customer?
Shell.
What would make you quit this idea?
If I can't figure out a financial stability for the business, or the customers are not willing to pay what it takes me to process it, if I could break even, I'd still do it.
Now that you've got all this perspective from the conversation, what is the first action that you would like a listener to take?
Analyze the economics and see if you can make it work.
Great.
Because that's like the most important part. I feel like getting it going, I think shouldn't be a problem, but really the economics, like finding the buyers and really talking to them and making sure they're not just talking to you and just kind of like giving you They're good feel kind of talk, but they're actually committing, being like, yeah, I will buy, like.
Well, you made it through the rapid fire section. Congratulations to you. I should mention at this point, we have another similar episode where we interviewed Anders Ankerlid. To the listener, go check that out. It's episode number 52, Recycle More E-Waste. This one is a little bit broader, but it's a nice complement to the discussion we're having here.
Cool. I'd love to chat with him. Is he doing it?
He's got a company where they recycle material. They make iPhone cases out of recyclable materials in Sweden.
Oh, like Pella, Pela.
Don't know much about Pella, but that's it sounds similar. So yeah, he's been successful at that. They're expanding into T-shirts and notebooks and other things like that. So Anders could be a good person for the listener to contact.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with him. So Pella Case, Pela, they were funded by Jay-Z, $5 million. They're a customer of ours. Just reach out. They're awesome. And so they're kind of like everywhere now. I see them. But yeah, I'd love to connect with them, chat with them.
Cool. Perfect. Okay, well, we're coming up on time. To the listener out there, take some action, follow through in the steps that we've talked about here. Email us at update@runwithit.fm with what you have done as a result of this conversation. Everyone who does respond will get access to a private Facebook group of action takers, and one lucky listener will earn a free mentoring session with Dmitry and potentially a business partnership on this idea. Dmitry, where can listeners go to learn more about what you're doing?
2 sites. So justreachout.io. That's my PR tool where you just pitch journalists on your own without PR firms. So justreachout.io. And then I got my personal blog. It's criminallyprolific.com, criminallyprolific.com. So prolific, it's criminal. So that's why I named it that way.
Great. We'll include all that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dmitry. Enjoy the conversation. And to the listener out there, go take this idea and run with it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Should I sign us off the Facebook, YouTube?
Sure. Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop recording on Zencastr so we can upload that. I know you've got